In his first budget proposal, the governor is calling to decriminalize marijuana if its users, manufacturers, and distributors handle 25 grams or fewer. Today is President's Day, a day traditionally set aside to honor the first and 16th presidents. Steve Jordahl reports on why George Washington and Abraham Lincoln stand out from their peers.
There were no rules to follow when George Washington ascended the steps of Federal Hall on Wall Street in New York City and took the first ever oath of office in 1789. He was the hero of the Revolutionary War and had the full faith and favor of the nation. He could have lavished in the pageantry of a monarchy like our English cousins, but instead, according to Dr. Richard Land of Southern Seminary, set a humbler tone.
President Washington sort of defined the job, and perhaps most importantly, besides leading us to victory in the Revolution, he voluntarily turned away from power after 2 terms.
Abraham Lincoln, on the other hand, presided over a deeply divided country and faced fierce opposition his entire presidency. So fierce, it cost him his life.
Lincoln is the man who held us together during the great crisis of our Civil War. And at Gettysburg, just months after that terrible, terrible battle, said that we are here contending whether government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Land says Lincoln's task was similar to the one we face today in our deeply divided nation. A Ronald Reagan quote states it nicely.
He said, quote, Abraham Lincoln recognized that we could not survive as a free land when some people could decide that others were not fit to be free and should therefore be slaves. Likewise, we cannot survive as a free nation when some men decide that others are not fit to live and should be abandoned to abortion or infanticide.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Chris Brooks.
We cannot underestimate the responsibility of evangelism. That is why shows like this, Equipped, which is committed to equipping you every day to live, share, and defend your faith, are extremely important, because anyone who does not confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is outside of God's saving grace.
Equipped, weekdays at noon Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The better way to solve this problem would be for Democrats to support what they supported in the past and give this president funding for better barriers, which we need.
So the president, one, has the authority. Yes, it is an emergency that has been shown before. And I believe at the end of the day, this wall is going to be built, not sea to shining sea, but about 200 miles.
We need to secure our border. We need to fix our horribly broken legal and illegal immigration system. And so, hopefully after this impasse now is over in terms of funding the government, we can sit down on a bipartisan basis and start solving these problems and fix our systems.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hey there. Welcome to the program. I am so glad to be with you. It's Monday. I don't know if you're feeling the Monday blues, but I'm not, because I feel like there's a lot to be encouraged about. And when I'm talking about encouragement, I'm speaking of not just in the news realm, but in the everyday people type realm. So let's first, who's on the show today? You're probably thinking, who we're going to chat with? We're going to speak to Richard Lim. He's a fan favorite here on Stacy on the Right. He often comes on the program and is just fantastic. He is the creator of This American President podcast, so he's an expert on American presidents. And what's so fascinating about the things that he shares with us is that even though he's talking about men who've been dead for, almost 200 years, some of them, lots and lots of time has passed in between when these men were in power and now, the lessons that can be learned from them stand the test of time. And so it's going to be really great to talk to him about President's Day, George Washington, and why people need to know about socialism. And I love these kinds of interviews because he's going to give us some information that you can kind of put in your toolkit. And then the next time you hear that good friend of yours or coworker or someone that you care and respect for them, but they are now starting to kind of dance around with this idea of socialism, what's going to happen is you're going to have something that you can leave them with, a nugget. Not an argument, not a disagreement, not something that rips the bonds of friendship, but just a bit of information that they can take home and ruminate over and research for themselves. Or maybe it kind of sinks into them and they decide, you know what, I that makes sense. They may not overtly come to you and say, hey, I'm voting for Donald Trump next time. We're not looking for that. It's the incremental wins that add up to a victory. It's not one day where everyone in America who's a conservative goes out and says 3 amazing talking points, in the style of the latest hot pundit, and everybody's converted. It's incremental educational wins over time, winning people with not just information, but the truth of living and the emotional aspects that are connected with it, stories. And so Richard's going to come on and talk to us about all of those things. We're also going to talk about how the media has now gone silent on Jussie Smollett's race crime hoax. And just to give you a rundown, because this story is really, okay, can I just expose? Okay, so when I first heard that some dude from Empire, a show I don't watch, had been attacked in Chicago by 2 people wearing MAGA hats, where, you can't even get served a cup of coffee in Chicago wearing a MAGA hat. So why would someone wear it at night, in the middle of the night? Just, it's an invitation to get mugged in Chicago. But anyway, and Chicago's not MAGA country. Southern Illinois is MAGA country. If you want to find some strong Republicans and people who really care deeply for what they do and for their country and for conservative politics and good, strong Christians, Southern Illinois. In a state like Illinois, where they're almost in servitude to their government with the taxation and the corruption, they still live there and they still make lives there and they still turn out fantastic kids who go on to be leaders all over the country. Southern Illinois, but not Chicago. Chicago's not MAGA country. So here's just what we know today, as of right now. One of Jussie Smollett's attorneys has quit. The Nigerian brothers that have been questioned by the police say that Jussie paid them to participate in this hoax. He directed them to buy a rope to put around his neck as a noose. And Nancy Pelosi has quietly deleted a tweet that had 100,000 likes, where she talked about, just in general but specific terms, about race hatred in America. And every single story that the mainstream media has put forward on Jussie Smollett has tied the actions of these so-called race hatred fueled Trump supporters. They've framed that as something that's happening in America because Donald Trump is a racist and he's spewing hate from the White House and enabling other racists to go out and do horrible things. So today on the show, I'm going to give you a definitive list, which you can find for yourself. I've posted it on the Facebook page, and it's also on my Twitter feed, @StacyOnTheRight. You can find that list of all of the times that they've been able to cull so far, of all the times that the media has said, look at these 2 barbarian Trump supporters beating up this person, defacing this church, anti-Semitism, yada, yada, yada. And every single time on this list, they've all been debunked as hoaxes. So the smearing of Trump supporters has been going on for over 2 years now with no end in sight. And so that's why it's so important to note that the mainstream media that last week was lauding this guy and, doing all of his heavy lifting and giving him softball interviews, now they've gone silent because it turns out he was getting the axe. The show was thinking of cutting him. And he thought, well, if there's a race crime against me and I get a whole bunch of publicity for the show, they probably won't let me go. And so he paid 2 Nigerians to hook him up. So we'll get to that list. We're also going to talk about CBS's Lara Logan, who's come out in this interview with a Navy SEAL. He does some kind of podcast for Breitbart. And she said to him, the media is mostly liberal. And even by talking to you about these subjects, I'm committing professional suicide. So we're going to talk a little bit about that interview. But right now, so I have 2 awesome things for you to begin the show off with for our daily confession. And this is no accident. I was just reading through my Bible for Bible study homework, and I found this information. It's so good. So let's start off with, we're talking about mercy and grace. God is merciful. Ephesians 2:4-9 says, but because of his great love for us, God, who's rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. And God raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms in Christ Jesus, in order that in the coming ages he he might show the incomparable riches of his grace, expressed in his kindness to us in Christ Jesus. For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so no one can boast. So what are we talking about here? Well, this is one of the attributes of God. He's merciful. Mercy actually differs from grace in that grace gives what is not deserved, while mercy does not give what is deserved. So mercy is compassion in action towards sinners who have no claim or right to receive such treatment. Deserving mercy is actually a contradictory term. Mercy is only for sinners. Angels do not experience it because they don't need it. Mercy is God's idea. It's available to everyone, but only through Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Now, God's mercy is great, tender, abundant, and everlasting. Mercy is interwoven with all other attributes of God. His loving kindness actually initiates mercy. His holiness ensures the integrity of that mercy, and his truth guarantees the reliability of that mercy. God's power assures its duration, and God's faithfulness demands its constancy. You know, one of my favorites, God is not a man that he should lie. He doesn't lie. So the results of mercy are forgiveness, restoration, and praise on the part of those who experience mercy. So I have two more scriptures, and they go to the attributes of God. Psalm 86:15 says, "But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." And Psalm 103:8 says, "The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love." So here's one of the promises of God. And the promises of God are just, they're interwoven all throughout the Bible. And they give us assurance that God is going to do what he says he's going to do. He actually promises us things that he's going to do, actions he's going to take, the nature of his very being. He promises us things about that in the Bible. 2 Peter 1:3-4 says, "His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him, who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption of the world caused by evil desires." That's magnificent. So that is super encouraging. It's a great way to dive into this week and make sure that we're just absolutely plugged into what God has for us and everything that's going on right now, which, you know, it looks a little up, it looks a little down, it looks a little bumpy, rocky. That's normal. But we can be assured that God's mercy and grace endures. The mercies are fresh every morning, and that we have access to all of that through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. So be encouraged about that. So let's now talk about, and I found this, I couldn't believe what was in this piece. And, you know, so full disclosure, a lot of people, just by nature of the way that they were raised or in church or the way things are discussed, we kind of have a little bit of a fear of sharing the gospel with people that we know are not Christians, or if we're unsure about their salvation. We don't want to make things awkward. But there's this interesting quote from, you guys might remember Penn and Teller. And one of the things that Penn of Penn and Teller, his name's Penn Jillette, he's half the magician duo of Penn and Teller. He said, "How much do you have to hate somebody to believe everlasting life is possible and not tell them that?" So in other words, if you know that everlasting life is possible, meaning you're a Christian, you believe that you have access to everlasting life and that you're on your way there, and you know that someone that's in your sphere of influence, whether it's a coworker or a friend or a family member, that they don't have the assurance of salvation, how much do you have to hate them to tell them nothing about it, to not share it? So he takes the opposite tack. Instead of saying, me telling a friend about Jesus Christ puts us in an awkward position, he says, how could you not tell the friend? If they reject the information, then your hands are clean. But if you really care about them, if they're truly your friend, and friendship implies love, respect, and admiration, how could you not tell them? Here's the quote from him. He says, "I've always said that I don't respect people who don't proselytize." And this is an atheist, by the way. If you're wondering what Penn Jillette believes, he kind of, you know, dances around. He believes this, he believes that from, you know, every couple of years it's something different. But usually, if you ask him directly, he says he's an atheist. He says, "I don't respect that at all. If you believe that there's a heaven and a hell and people could be going to hell or not getting eternal life, and you think that it's not really worth telling them this because it would make it socially awkward, how much do you have to hate somebody to not proselytize? Yet, if you look at the numbers, a significant portion of practicing Christians actually reject evangelism. And this article posits that the reason they do so is because they don't really believe in hell. Now, almost all practicing Christians believe that their faith means being a witness about Jesus. This ranges from 95 to 97% among all generational groups. That the best thing that could ever happen to someone is for them to know Jesus, 94% or so. Almost all practicing Christians, from 86% to 92%, also say they know how to respond when someone asks them about their faith. A majority of every generational group believes they are gifted at sharing their faith with other people. Yet, despite all of this, almost half of all millennials aged 20 to 34 say it's wrong to share one's beliefs. And Gen Xers, boomers, and elders who are age 73 and over also have significant portions of their groups that say the same thing. It's wrong to tell other people about Jesus Christ, especially if you know that they're, of a different faith walk, like if you know they're a Muslim or if you know they're Jewish or what have you. Well, Jesus talks about hell a lot in the Bible. He actually says hell exists. In Matthew 10:28, Jesus says, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell." Jesus says more mentions of hell than he does of heaven. Jesus uses the term Gehenna, which translates as hell, a dozen times in the Gospels. He uses synonyms involving fire about 20 times. Jesus describes it in vivid detail, saying it's a place of unquenchable fire, outer darkness, eternal torment. He says it is a place where the worm does not die. If you're anything like me, that ought to scare the pants off you right there, because I'm like totally afraid of worms. Where people gnash their teeth in anguish and regret, a place from which there is no return, even to warn loved ones. More than anyone else in the Bible, Jesus talked about the doctrine of hell because he wants us to take it seriously. We should shudder at churches that don't know what it means to shudder about hell. We've got to start telling people for the reason that we believe and the reason for our hope. The reason why we don't have to leave everything here on the table on earth because we have an eternal existence. We'll be back with Richard Lim right after this. Keep it here.
Every day in preborn centers across the country, young women in crisis find refuge. Here's Roxy, nurse director for preborn at the Crisis Pregnancy Center in Southern California.
A lot of them come to us and they feel rejected, they feel alone, they're in a crisis situation, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to start. We believe that sharing the compassionate love of Jesus Christ is what really makes what we do work.
Through love and compassion, young women facing tough situations get to meet Jesus Christ and their unborn baby on ultrasound.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and you'll receive a story and a picture of babies' lives that were spared. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with The Legacy Moment. Don't you hate it when people give you directions and they say, you just can't miss it? I'm almost always guaranteed to miss it after that statement. Well, I've learned to swallow my pride and tell people, now, would you please give me the directions slowly, step by step, or I will surely miss it. I'm so glad God is clear about the directions he gives. Listen to Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 11 through 14. For this commandment which I command you today is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it. But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. God says, I'm not trying to make this difficult. It's not out of reach for you. He's made it clear. For those who know Christ, God has given us all we need to understand what he says. Beyond that, his word is to be integrated into the whole of our lives. It says, but the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. God wants what he says to possess us, to grab us, to be a part of all we are. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. God's not playing some hide-and-seek game with us. If you want to know what he wants and expects, open the book and follow the directions. You can't miss it.
Thanks, Crawford, and thank you for listening to today's Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz, pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Roswell, Georgia, and heard on the weekly program Living a Legacy. To view an online transcript of today's thoughts by Crawford, go to livingalegacy.org. That's livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you for making your home here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Find out about the marriage conference that's coming up in the month of June in Tupelo, Mississippi by going to urbanfamilytalk.com. We'd love to see you there and meet you. We had a great time meeting people last year, and apparently the lineup of speakers is quite fantastic, and so it will be a great time of fellowship and learning about God's plan for marriage and family and life with American Family Radio and hosts from both sides of the network. So I am so excited to speak to Richard Lim. He's a creator of This American President podcast, former White House political appointee in the Bush administration, and also an author and national security commentator. Richard, thank you for joining the show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, and I've missed being on your show. It's been a while.
I know. You can thank Demetrius for that. I don't know what his problem is. He knows you're a fan favorite, so you have to ping him and get yourself on the schedule, because I think one of the best things about when you come on is how thought-provoking your historical commentary is. You share things that we either don't remember or never learned, and people constantly email me and tell me after you've been on that they really enjoyed you being here. So I'm glad to get to talk to you on President's Day.
Well, yeah, thank you again, and also thank you to your listeners. And yeah, it's great. It's one thing I have to say, though. It's President's Day, but officially, according to the legal holiday, it's Washington's birthday. And President's Day was kind of this thing that, mattress, salesmen and car salesmen created. But in actuality, it is Washington's birthday.
And I kind of wish that it was still, when I was younger, I remember them making a specific statement that it was originally George Washington's birthday, but now we celebrate George Washington and President Lincoln's birthdays on this day. And now It's just President's Day, which is kind of weird because there are definitely some presidents that I don't feel like we should be celebrating, Carter, Obama,
Absolutely.
Clinton. I mean, there are presidents who did not leave a good legacy behind. And so why should we be celebrating them like everybody gets to share the holiday? It's like me telling you, Richard, it's not just your birthday, it's my birthday too. And you'd be like, no, it's not. It's still my birthday. It's my birthday. And I'm like, well, it's mine too.
Exactly. And, Washington, Lincoln, I think there are certain presidents that many people admire. And then there are just a few like Andrew Johnson and James Buchanan that none of us really want to have come back,
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about George Washington specifically. For some people, they're convinced by mainstream media outlets that really we shouldn't celebrate George Washington. He was not a great man to celebrate. He owned slaves. And even though he led our nation to victory in battle and was a president who left the presidency rather than continuing to rule, term after term after term, he said 2 terms is enough for me and moved on to make room for other leaders to come forward. I mean, he's an admirable man. Obviously, the taint of slavery does hold sway with him, but it was lawful in the day. And so we really have to look at it from the nuanced perspective of people who we would never condone slavery now, but then it was lawful. And we are a nation that literally fought brothers and fathers and sisters and brothers, and we ripped ourselves asunder to remain a nation without slavery. So we have a great story that came from the horrible things that happened. But what else was so fantastic about George Washington?
Yeah, well, actually, I think it's a great point that you bring up about slavery, because to admire George Washington is not to say that he was a perfect man. He would have been the first to tell you that. If when he was nominated to be the commander of the Continental Army, the first thing he said was, I do not believe that I'm equal to the command I'm honored with. And so he was the first person. If you read his inaugural address, he's talking about his own personal defects. And a lot of historians say that, well, this wasn't false modesty. I think he was just somebody, there's this great quote, I believe it was by, I think it was Carl Sandburg, one of the great writers of the 19th century. And he said Washington was one of the few men in all of history that didn't get carried away by power. And, you look at members of Congress or even local politicians that, they have, a certain amount of power. They're not the president, but they have a power over a city or a power of office of whatever sort, and they abuse that power. And you look at George Washington, who literally could have been a king, and he refused to take personal advantage of that. He refused to ever, gain in any way that was unsavory. I mean, he was somebody that people really felt could be trusted. And, the slavery issue, obviously that's something that as a nation, unfortunately our nation partook in that institution, and, we should talk about it as such. But one thing I do want to say about George Washington is that he was the only major founding father that came to the conclusion that he should actually free a slave. And so at the end of his life, in his will, he wrote that those slaves should be freed, and that, the young should be taught skills, and that the elderly should be taken care of. That doesn't mean we excuse partaking in the institution, but I think that he was somebody that viewed slavery as a moral issue, and he said many times, he said it was the issue of regret in his own life. When he looked at his life, he said that this was the unavoidable issue of regret. And so I think you see a man that felt repentant about it and saw it in moral terms and saw it as a moral evil.
I agree with that. I think, obviously, what ends up happening is invariably people who are engaging in lawful activities during their own lifespan but have a moral objection to it, but do so because it's the norm of the day, or rather it is profitable to them because slavery was a profitable enterprise. There's a kind of tearing of the spirit that we don't really take into account because we don't have video from back then. He wasn't doing Facebook Lives about how he hated to own slaves, but his main source of wealth was the ownership of slaves and the land and maintenance of the land that he owned. And so, we would go back and forth. If we did have lives from back then, we'd be shocked at how some of these people struggled with it. And there were others who didn't struggle with it at all. They were mainly in the South, and they weren't abolitionists, and they thought that it was not just a necessary evil, but that it was something they wanted to maintain, which is what prompted the Civil War and the actions by President Lincoln. So I get, there's obviously, I think that slavery is abhorrent and it's disgusting, but I find it interesting that people would be so upset by slavery back then, Richard, more upset by it than they are by slavery in modern times, because we still have slavery existing in the world today.
Yes. And, I think that one thing also that has to be put into context is that, the people that grew up in Washington's time, they grew up in a world where, the institution was firmly embedded into their lifestyles. Again, that doesn't mean it's okay. But the question, it's for us, slavery, yes, we should affirm that it's evil. But here's the question. What do you do about it? How do you fix it? And in a republic, today we have lots of problems. You mentioned in the world, the fact that slavery continues in many different forms, sexual slavery, things of that nature. But lots of other problems continue. And we have difficulty finding answers to those problems, especially in a republic where it's very hard to get everyone to agree on something. And I think that founding generation, that was really the same thing. There was this horrible institution, and many people felt it was wrong. but many. And the question of how do you deal with that? How do you convince enough people to know what the right answer is? That's when the question becomes a lot more complicated. And I think that that's something that we have to look at the founders and say, well, you know, they had the genius to win a war against the most powerful nation, the British, to create a constitution and to implement a government. And I think it was just beyond their powers to solve that issue. And I honestly think that it was probably beyond any generation's powers to solve that issue at that point in time. So they hoped that the system they put in place would eventually allow for that institution to die off.
Yeah, and a lot of their writing reflects that. So I want to pivot over to the issue of socialism, and this is something that gets a little annoying, right, Richard? Because if you have any memory of anything that we learned back in civics, starting in middle school, going on up, depending on what your order, you know, of informational sharing was, you know, curriculum-wise, at some point you learned about the ills of socialism and how it led to world wars and how it led to the deaths of millions of people. Yet here we are again with this issue. Socialism is gaining popularity in America.
You know, okay, so this has been a subject that's been always of interest to me. There's a documentary, it's called China, A Century of Revolution, and it's a 3-part documentary. And the second part in that documentary is about the Mao era in China, when Mao Zedong was in power. And, you know, this has always been a particular fascination with me because I think people forget that the way we look at North Korea now, you know, very extreme form of communism, very closed off to the world. That was what China was in the Mao era, you know, up until maybe the very end. But pretty much most of the time, that was that time. It was very repressive, and not just repressive, not just, you know, the kind of natural hallmarks of, say, the Stalins and, you know, like the purges and all those things, but also bizarre. I mean, it's just, you know, it's a cult of personality. You know, the person, who's ever the dictator becomes the god. His photos everywhere. You know, in China at one point, everyone had to do the Mao dance every day. I mean, literally every day they had to do this little dance in worship of the leader, Mao. This is China. This is a fifth of the world's population. And at the same time, about 30 to 45 million people were killed. I mean, it's unfathomable. You know, and this wasn't that long ago. This was in the late 50s, early 60s. There was a great famine caused by Mao. 30 to 45 million people were killed. And I invite people, not too long ago, I invited a bunch of my friends to watch this documentary with me because if 30 or 45 million people die because of a system of government, you know, socialism, communism, we need to know about that. The information's out there. You could actually watch this documentary on YouTube if you wanted to. And one of the reasons I think it's becoming more popular is because we don't do a good job of just telling people about it. You know, again, it's all out there. Go on YouTube, you can watch, you know, it's on Wikipedia, you could read books about it. The problem is we don't talk about it, and then you see, you know, democratic socialists getting elected. And it's really unbelievable that people really get fixated on this ideology, but we need to do a better job of sharing what socialism actually means. It's not some benign, you know, nice little system, whatever. It's deadly. It's deadly and it's evil.
Well, and also it's not necessary. So it is deadly, it is evil, and learning about it, I believe it really makes you more of an adult. I think when I see people on video talking about how we just need to do socialism because Europe's doing it, or we need to do it because it would make America better, they're immature. Learning about it makes them more mature. But we don't need socialism in America. So the reason people are dying to get in here is not because we need to change the whole thing, because it's bad or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, you know, there's this sense, and, you know, President Harry Truman, he was a Democrat, but he was a different Democrat than what you see today. And in his inaugural address, he said that socialism is essentially it's fool's gold. It's a lie. You know, people the poor of the world look at it and they say, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be equality. It's going to be, but in reality, it's misery, just pure misery. And whatever one thinks about Harry Truman, I think he arrived at a key insight on what socialism is. The problem, it's an especially insidious type of ideology because it's attractive to people. Thankfully we've looked at different ideologies like Nazism and we've said, oh, well, that's wrong, and thankfully. But then with socialism, there's still this kind of, it might work this time. No, it won't work this time. It's at war with human nature. It's at war with religion. Communism is, specifically outlaws God. It is a system that is at war with God, and so and with human nature. And so, I think that as somebody that loves history and loves to share it, I personally feel an obligation to say, look, the information's out there. Let's spend a little time and look at it. I have friends that, if they're honest with themselves, they would probably have to say that, I'm from California. I went to public school. I got a lot of liberal friends here. I got a lot of conservative friends here, but unfortunately, there are a lot of people that I think if they're honest with themselves, they do kind of yearn for this kind of the false promises of socialism, and it's scary.
It is. It's like, so I have so many things I could ask you, but I see it's 2:38. I'm going to give you the last word on this. I guess so what is the most important thing anyone could do? Like any regular person who you overhear a coworker or they come to you and they say, socialism isn't really that bad. I don't know what you Trump supporters are upset about. You got like 15 seconds. What do they say?
Oh, boy. Well, what I would say is that I think that it's hard to convince somebody just by arguing with them. But if you just show them the evidence, some of my friends I invited and I said, hey, this is a Chinese history documentary. And, people are interested in that kind of stuff. I live in the Washington area, so we're all nerds here. They'll watch it. And I didn't have to tell them socialism's terrible. All they had to do was watch it. And they learned, oh, my gosh, this is bad, and I feel a little foolish for thinking that this is good. And I think that's a good way that we can help convince people of it instead of kind of arguing them through.
Perfect.
Show them the evidence.
Thank you so much, Richard Lim, for joining and for that fantastic information. We will have you back again soon.
Thank you.
Have a great week. We'll be back with more right after this. Stay there.
What does it take to be a sports success and a team player? Here's Pro Football Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Walter Payton once ran for 275 yards in a single game, and he did it while running a 102-degree fever. That's the kind of player Walter was, unstoppable. But his most enduring legacy is the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, given annually to a player for outstanding humanitarian and charity work. The award was named for him in 1999, the year he died of a rare liver disease. Philippians 2:15 says we should live our lives so that you may become blameless and pure. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. Few shine brighter than Hall of Famer Walter Payton. He was an uncommon athlete with a remarkable legacy.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of Quiet Strength and the Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved. Submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
I just thank God, for this moment. I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
Donald Trump's America.
Last Friday's national emergency declaration by the president is opening the door to a fight among the legislative and executive branches it may take the judicial branch to solve. Democrats like New Jersey House member Jeff Van Drew believe this is not the best use of this power. He says on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures,
I'm not a real strong partisan, and I believe in bipartisanship. In this case, I think the president has overreached.
But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy of California said also on Fox this is well within the president's power.
It is an emergency that has been shown before, and I believe at the end of the day, this wall is going to be built, not sea to shining sea, but about 200 miles.
But not all Republicans are on board. Texas Republican House member Will Hurd said on CBS Face the Nation that this should not be how it works.
My concern is our government wasn't designed to operate by national emergency.
The president can use a veto if Congress says no to the declaration. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'll tell you this, the drugs had gotten so bad in my 6.5 years working in southern Arizona that literally they had to provide every police officer on the department with Narcan, which is something that you use on a person as they're overdosing on heroin or a downer. You give it to them and it brings them back to life. Every police officer had to wear that. Fentanyl had to have that on them at all times. Fentanyl became so bad in southern Arizona that every single police officer, when we test drugs, we have to be outfitted with a full bodysuit with a mask on, because we didn't know if there could be fentanyl contained in drugs that we test, normal drugs that we normally test. And if it get onto your skin or you inhale it, you can die. It is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. And they don't want to talk about that. It's not only a threat to the community, but it's a threat to law enforcement. What comes with drugs is crime, gangs, guns, murder, torture. All of these things are apparent in southern Arizona and is moving all across the country.
Welcome back to the program. That was actually, I think I was going to do that in second hour, but former police officer Brandon Tatum on Border Crisis. And he actually worked in this industry. He worked in protecting Americans from drug lords and gangs and criminals and all that. And when he is talking about it, you can hear the passion in his voice, why he's so passionate about not only that we need a wall, but that we need so the wall enables us to take what are really finite resources and put them in areas where they're more effectively used. So the wall means you don't need actual Border Patrol agents in areas where there's no wall. The wall enables us to move those resources to areas where they could perform greater levels of drug interdiction. Democrats are really fond of saying how we get most of our drugs through lawful entry points. Not only is that a lie, but it also is a deflection away from the fact that the drugs that do come through the legal entry points wouldn't be able to come through if we had more Border Patrol agents there with dogs, drug sniffing dogs, more of them able to screen every single vehicle that passes through, every single truck, if we had better use of the resources. So the wall is not only not medieval, it makes more sense than any other solution that's being offered, and it's a permanent one. One of the things that people keep asking me about is E-Verify. And if you read Ann Coulter's books, she talks about how E-Verify is a fantastic system. But the people who gutted E-Verify after Reagan said, we're going to use it, we're going to give amnesty to these people and then do E-Verify, the people who gutted it were Republicans. They didn't want these huge fines against businesses who were hiring illegal aliens because they didn't want to stop the practice. So when you got people on your side who are wearing your team jersey but are acting like they're on the other team or they're on their own team, you need solutions that are permanent. And if medieval is the term we're going to use, isn't there something else that people use the term medieval for? It means extreme. So medieval can mean actual, the historical time period. It can refer to something that's old or antiquated or outdated, but medieval can also refer to options that are extreme, extraordinary, relentless, merciless, completely all-encompassing. If someone says they're going to get medieval on you, they're not saying they're going to be gentle. They're saying they're going to go old school, and you're going to experience things that you maybe don't want to experience because they're medieval in nature and we are a modern type of a people. So I want to share with you, call lines are open, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And I talked to you a little bit about the interview that Lara Logan did, and she was speaking to Navy SEAL Mike Ritland about a variety of topics on his Mic Drop podcast, and they were discussing mainly how she became a journalist. Why did she decide to do that? And she told an interesting story of being 8 years old, and her mom was coming to pick her up from school. She's American now, but she's she's an immigrant. And the teacher said, hey, when your mom gets here to pick you up, make sure and let me know because I have something I want to tell her. And so she runs out to the car to get picked up by her mom, and the teacher comes out with her, and the teacher tells her mom, look, if your daughter doesn't become a writer, it's going to be a travesty against humanity because this child is a writer. She's got the gift. She should cultivate it, and she should get an education that would allow her to do that for a living. And she went on to make a joke about herself and say, I think my colleagues at CBS would say there are other writers out there who are better than me, and that I'm maybe not God's gift to journalism as my teacher thought I would be, but I do believe that kind of set me on the path. And then it happened to her again in high school where someone who was a teacher said to her, it was teachers who were trying to get kids interested in literature and journalism specifically. And they had some people come in to speak, like they always have people from outside of the school come in and they're professionals and they speak to the high schoolers. And they came in and they said, if you want to know more about how newsrooms work, you can come and you can take a tour of the newsroom and you can, we'll give it to you. And so she did that. And that was when it was cemented in her mind that this was something real she was going to do. But then after all of that, that's like really interesting perspective to have about her. But then you look at, our media apparatus as it is now. Gone are the idealistic kind of glory days of, these intrepid reporters rooting out stories and following a story wherever it might lead. Now we have journalists who literally, if a story is not leading to something bad about Donald Trump, they're not interested in hearing it. They don't want to read it. They're not interested in investigating it. If it does lead to something bad about Donald Trump, but it's not bad enough, they're willing to embellish it. They're willing to add to it. They're willing to make it into something that smears people. And that can't be something that is good for America. It can't be something that's good for the practice of journalism and the maintaining the trust of the American people. So I want to give you a quote from her. She talked about that everywhere journalism is practiced, the media are mostly liberal, not just in the United States. She also showed that registration among journalists presents that the media is out of balance, and she came up with a metaphor to explain how she believes the press is tinged by sameness of opinion. And this is really fascinating. So let me share what she said. She said, visually, anyone who's ever been to Israel and been to the Wailing Wall has seen that the women have this tiny little spot in the front of the wall to pray, and the rest of the wall is for the men. And to me, that's a great representation of the American media, is that in this tiny little corner where the women pray, you've got Breitbart and Fox News and a few others, One America News Now, etc. And from there on, you have CBS, ABC, NBC, Huffington Post, Politico, whatever, right? All of them. And that's the problem for me, because even if it was reversed, if it was vastly mostly on the right, that would also be a problem for me. My experience has been that the more opinions you have, the more ways that you look at everything in life. And I think it bites us on our side as well. I talked a little bit about the backlash that I had on my Facebook page. It was last week, it was the week before, because I posted a story about how there's multiple measles outbreaks across the country. And I didn't say, hi, I'm Dr. Stacy, and you will go get vaccinated. I said, you should probably, I didn't use the word probably. I said, go check out make sure your kids are vaccinated, make sure your MMR vaccine is up to date, because as adults, what we often forget with the MMR vaccine, if you don't see your primary care physician, internist, whatever you call your doctor, if you don't go in for yearly checkups as an adult, then you're not aware that you, as an adult, need one booster for the MMR vaccine. Now, I did not think this was controversial. I posted this because I was concerned that adults who aren't affiliated with the military wouldn't have had their doctor tell them that they needed to do that. And It didn't occur to me that there was a huge movement out there. I wasn't aware that American Family Radio American Family Association had made a statement about laws giving parental opt-out in Mississippi. I wasn't aware of any of that. I posted it, put my phone down. I cooked, I cleaned, I did some BSF homework, played with the dog, watched some mindless television, and picked my phone up later to see that there was a firestorm brewing on my page. Angry people calling me everything but a child of God. You're not a Christian, yada, yada, yada. Now, if you were listening not last Friday, but the Friday before, I apologized on air because my reaction was to say, it's my page, it's my opinion, and I'll post what I want, which is the truth, but it wasn't very nice of me to post that. Well, that prompted leaders in the, vaccine integrity movement or whatever it's called. I call them anti-vaxxers, but they said they're not anti-vaxxers because their kids are vaccinated. Again, an issue that I'm not into telling people that they have to be vaccinated or that you should not be vaccinated. I come from a military background. I'm a fourth-generation military person. So that means, as far as I know, every person in my family, including my extended family, has been vaccinated for everything. And the reason I say that is because all of them are affiliated somehow with the military, some family member who's in the military. And if you're on active duty, you don't go to your commander when he says, everyone line up for the flu shot. The people from the dispensary are here to give everybody their flu shot. You don't walk up and say, I'm not taking the flu shot today. You're a military asset. You're getting the flu shot unless you're sick. Then you will be rescheduled for people who are sick during the administration, and you will get it then. Unless you have a doctor's note saying you're not getting it, you're getting it. As well as the vaccinations. You don't simply show up to the military recruiter's office and say, I've never been vaccinated, and expect to get into the U.S. military. So my perspective on it has been one of, what vaccine is scheduled? I get it and I move on. And I've never had a problem, nor has any other person in my family, nor has anyone that I have known during my entire childhood, because I was born into the military as a brat, because my dad was already on active duty when I was born. And my mom, I actually asked her about it. We've never known anyone to have an adverse reaction from a vaccine. So that's where I'm coming from. So I had no idea that I had the power to make people do things by simply posting it on Facebook, but the backlash was immediate. People started posting negative reviews on my page. People started direct messaging me. I had people threaten me. I had people tag other hosts on this network as if those hosts could make me take back or retract my opinion, which I'm happy to say this is not that kind of a workplace. And saying all of that to say that on the right, we have some echo chambers as well. We have some areas in which if you say something, and you don't even have to, I was not looking to pick a fight. This was not an instance where I said, who can I rile up today? I'm having a bad day. I'm going to kick my dog, and I'm going to go on Facebook, and I'm going to post something, and I want every Christian in Christendom to come and attack me so I can attack them back. Are you kidding me? Do you think I have time for that kind of stuff? I don't. And I'm not particularly interested in being at war with everybody, especially people who I consider us to be, of similar belief backgrounds. And so the echo chamber is dangerous from both directions. And the statement that she's made here, that even though she's right-leaning, she would have a problem with it if the only news out there was Fox and Breitbart and One American News, et cetera, it's an accurate statement to make. Because when we only listen to opinions that agree with our own, we demonize the other side to the point that a person who we're agreeing with each other on 90% of everything. I had people with cross symbols in their avatar, people who have the word Christian in their little bio that they share on online social media, were emailing me and sending stuff to me. And it looked just like when the liberals get mad when I say, being black is not the most important aspect of who I am. You hate yourself, and you hate your kids, and you hate your ancestors. You hate this, you hate that. You call yourself black. It was the same type of stuff, only it was surrounding the fact that how can I be pro-life and how can I be a Christian and support people getting vaccinated? Well, I don't actually support or unsupport any of that. I have been vaccinated. My kids, my husband, everybody in my family has, and that's my perspective that I'm coming from. It is now something that, and it was also, you're uninformed. You don't know anything about this subject, which I do. I've read quite a bit of literature because quite a few people who actually call themselves anti-vaxxers have sent it to me in the almost 10 years that I've been doing this. I was also accused of being thin-skinned, which that has come to me so many times. If I was thin-skinned, I wouldn't be doing this job. because I've been called every curse word there is. I've had legitimate, actual threats leveled against me and my family, and we've done investigations into people, and they've been visited by law enforcement in this state and in other states. If I was thin-skinned, this would not be where I find myself every day from 2 to 4 p.m. So the reason I'm sharing all of this, especially this part about, you got Lara Logan saying she's committing professional suicide. That should never be the case when sharing our opinions. And it should never be the case, especially for people who call themselves Christians, that the first place that we go to when someone disagrees with us is to attack them and go after their personal views and their family. That's not what Jesus Christ did. It's not what we're called to do. But rather than condemning that, because I also had a negative reaction to the attacks, they were all out personal attacks on me, and they were still there on the Facebook page for people to look at. I absolutely understand when people get triggered and get upset and they want to lash out. But is that going to get us anywhere? I don't know if you're kind of glomming onto this, but I haven't changed my mind. I think it was very prudent of me to tell people to make sure that they have their MMR vaccine up to date with states experiencing explosions of measles outbreaks. I never said I was a doctor. I never will say that because I'm not a doctor and I'm not going to be. And I'm not interested in being a doctor. But it is okay for me to suggest that people check their vaccine level if they want to. And if they don't want to, it's perfectly fine for them to keep scrolling and not attack me personally and then complain later when I've blocked them. Just speaking from the center of logic. Update, I'm going to be back at the White House later on this week. I'll be doing some live streams from there. But right now, if you're leaving us, God bless from the Heartland. Thank you for making your home here at American Family Radio. If you're sticking around, I'll be back after these messages.
Family Talk.
You only want to donate to biblically sound organizations. So as a federal or state employee, why not choose the American Family Association Combined Federal Campaign Designation 12037? Of the organizations on the CFC list, AFA is one of the few standing for you and your family. By choosing 12037, you help make it possible for us to continue.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump is accusing the former acting FBI director of trying to orchestrate a coup. John Decker has more from the White House.
The president on Twitter reacting to the allegation made by McCabe that there were serious discussions at the Department of Justice about invoking the 25th Amendment to try to remove President Trump from office. The president writing he was fired for lying, and now his story gets even more deranged. He and Rod Rosenstein, who was hired by Jeff Sessions and other beauty, looked like they were planning a very illegal act and got caught. Rosenstein and the DOJ have disputed McCabe's allegation in a statement calling McCabe's claim inaccurate and factually incorrect.
According to Syrian Democratic fighters, the ISIS caliphate is only days away from being defeated. Syria now has to figure out what to do with the prisoners who are being held by U.S. and Kurdish forces. Trey Yingst has more from Jerusalem.
Kurdish and Syrian Democratic forces have cornered ISIS fighters in the city of Baghouz to a single neighborhood. While intense fighting continues, the final ISIS pocket in Iraq and Syria is expected to be destroyed by the end of the week. A spokesperson for the Democratic fighters said the last ISIS militants are holding an estimated 1,000 civilians, making it hard for their forces to liberate this final stretch of land. That spokesperson also calling on the international community to help with processing the hundreds of foreign ISIS fighters, including Americans, being held in Kurdish jails, saying they could escape and threaten the West. Meanwhile, European governments are deciding how to prosecute their own citizens who went to join ISIS before the group was mostly destroyed.
Back to the U.S. now, where a college in Louisiana has cut ties with the Council of Christian Colleges and Universities over an LGBT initiative Bill Bumpus reports.
Louisiana College has dropped its membership with the organization. The college, affiliated with the Louisiana Baptist Convention, disagrees with the Council of Christian Colleges and Universities for adopting the so-called Fairness for All compromise. It affirms biblical beliefs about marriage and sexuality, but also backs sexual orientation laws. Mark Tooley, president of the Institute on Religion and Democracy, says that according to his understanding, CCCU believes it's inevitable that these types of laws are going to be universalized, so it's better to step ahead preemptively and get the religious liberty exemptions locked in. But he calls it a defensive argument.
I'm inclined to agree with many would say that it's a little bit presumptuous or a little bit maybe too early to semi-surrender at this point. And that even if we are bound to lose on that issue, still it's a matter of conviction to inscribe into law specific protections for a vague category known as sexual orientation. That's a dangerous precedent.
Tooley says some other colleges, after hearing from their own constituency, may follow the lead of Louisiana College and step away from the CCCU.
An agreement has been reached between the NFL and former quarterback-turned-activist Colin Kaepernick. Sports writer Tom Joyce of LiveSet.com and Washington Examiner says he was shocked to hear of an agreement.
I thought it was utterly ridiculous. Kaepernick hadn't played in the NFL in 2 seasons. A team had signed Eric Reid. He's a member of the Carolina Panthers. So I don't see why there'd be a collusion case there. And in the case of Kaepernick, he did it to himself by kneeling for the national anthem and hurting the league's bottom line.
Details of the agreement are not known. Yahoo Sports says it's not as significant as some believe. ESPN's Stephen A. Smith wants Kaepernick to release information. In final news this hour, the ecstatic sailor shown kissing a woman in Times Square celebrating the end of World War II has died. George Mendonça was 95 years old. Mendonça's daughter Sharon told the Providence Journal Mendonça fell and had a seizure at the assisted living facility in Rhode Island where he lived with his wife of 70 years. Mendonça was shown kissing Greta Zimmer Friedman, a dental assistant in a nurse's uniform, on August 14, 1945. It became one of the most famous photographs of the 20th century. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The better way to solve this problem would be for Democrats to support what they supported in the past and give this president funding for better barriers, which we need.
So the president, one, has the authority. Yes, it is an emergency that has been shown before. And I believe at the end of the day, this wall is going to be built, not sea to shining sea, but about 200 miles.
We need to secure our border. We need to fix our horribly broken legal and illegal immigration system. And so, hopefully after this impasse now is over in terms of funding the government, we can sit down on a bipartisan basis and start solving these problems and fix our systems.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Wow. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for making your home at American Family Radio. I'm also so excited to report that I'm going to be broadcasting from CPAC this year. It's my first time ever actually being invited to broadcast as one of their broadcasters. In other words, they're providing the means for me to do so. And I have a media registration, which means I'll be all over that puppy. Pray for the sister in the Lord, Stacy Washington, that I would be strong of ankles, because all that running around usually, you know how it is, you fly in somewhere and then you spend the whole time walking and your feet just hurt so bad. So I'm wearing comfortable shoes. I'm only packing cowgirl boots, the ones that have already been broken in. And I'm ready for this puppy. I'm so excited to get to do it. And so I'm going to quickly go to the phones with someone who held over from last segment. Thank you so much, Joe, in Arkansas. Thank you for holding on and for listening to the show.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for taking my call, Stacey.
Sure.
And what I called about was you were discussing the Founding Fathers and slavery with the first guest in the previous hour.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make this comment about that, and that's this. The left are famous for working by incrementalism. They might know that they can't get everything they want all at once, so they try to get it a little bit at a time.
True.
And that's what I see the Founding Fathers did with the issue of slavery. They found they couldn't found the country. They couldn't get all the states to agree to go into the Constitution and ratify it. By getting they found they couldn't get rid of slavery all at once and still form a country. So they did put things in the Constitution to gradually discourage and eliminate slavery. Like, for instance, they confined slavery to the southern states where it was already existing. They put it in the Constitution that for the purposes of the census, for the purposes of determining congressional representation, a slave would be counted as 3/5 of a person, so that the slave states would not be able to outvote the free states in the Congress.
Yep.
And then later on, of course, and they I think they also prohibited any new importation of slaves. And then later on, I think they prohibited slavery in the newly formed states after the original 13. Things like that. So, in other words, they tried. They set the country up so that incrementally slavery would be discouraged and reduced and finally eliminated. So they were doing the same kind of things the left-wingers do by working by incrementalism. And so the left-wingers are a bunch of hypocrites for criticizing the Founding Fathers by doing things incrementally that way instead of getting rid of slavery all at once, which they found impractical to do.
It's true. And the points that you're making are ones that are regularly misrepresented in media. Like when people talk about the 3/5 compromise, that slaves were counted as 3/5 of one person, people say that's because the founders felt that slaves were less than people. No, they knew they were people, and they knew that for every one of them. So slaves are a different kind of thing that people claimed to own back then, because you could actually make more slaves by having slaves have children, right? So you could literally just start off with 100 and then end up with many, many more than that, because the slaves are people. Even though they were property, they were still people. They could still reproduce. And the way that you've just laid this out, it's so clear that they basically said, this is evil. How can we stop it? We can't stop it now, but how can we stop it at some point? And they did it. That's the part that I just don't understand. And I am descended from slaves. So this isn't an issue of me being from Jamaica or Haiti or someplace like that and not understanding the issue. I know my history. I know when my ancestor who was sold into slavery arrived, and I know where he was sold and where he went. And I know the first member of that line who was free, who then went on to have my granddad he went on to have my great-granddad, and then my granddad, and then my dad, and then me. And I also know on my mom's side of the family how they entered the country. They were free blacks from Europe, and they came here. And so I know all of that, and I don't discount any of the things that happened. And I've heard the stories. My father, my grandfather, they've shared with us some of the things that they went through growing up in the Jim Crow South. It's the kind of stuff that you can let it make you mad. This is the trick of the enemy. When history in your own personal family, when you hear it and it literally makes your blood boil, and you can feel the water welling up behind your eyes, and you think, I can't believe you went through that. The enemy can take that and turn it into a seed of resentment and anger and hatred, and he can rob your current blessings from you. The flip side of everything that I just said about knowing all of that is that through all of that, I get to be an American. And through all of that, you have all of these family members of mine, all of these men going down to my father, and then me, and my husband also as a veteran, who served the U.S. military because they wanted to. Every one of them a volunteer. Everyone, some of them actually being, hit with enemy fire and earning, medals, decorated military veterans and retirees. There's more to the story than just the slavery aspect. And what I'm watching a lot of people, what's happening to them is they're being sold a bill of goods. Because you're descended from slaves, you have to be upset with America. You have to hate this country, when we're in reality, however you got here, I can tell you there's, what did we say, 42 million people in South America who, if they could have the history that Black Americans have here, no questions asked, you're a citizen. If you commit a crime, you go to prison, you come back out, you're still a citizen. When an immigrant commits a crime, when they come out of prison, they're subject to deportation. Being a natural-born citizen of this country gives you rights and privileges that just immigrating here doesn't give you. There are 42 million people who, if they could trade with the 38 million, 40 million blacks that are in this country who we're all citizens, they would do it in a heartbeat because it would give them something that they can't ever have, being a natural-born citizen of this country. And so I hate the slavery. I hate it. I hate that that's the history. But I have to thank God that that history led me to me being an American, to me being able to serve in the military, to me being able to claim this country as my birthright, to my kids being able to claim it as their birthright, that English is my first tongue. The Queen's English, by the way, none of that shibboleth and ebonics and all that stuff. That's an affront to what my ancestors went through to get to a place where they could speak proper English and have the respect of everyone that encountered them. And so it's a very, very interesting thing that we're watching, where we're seeing black people who have college education, some of them even, they're lawyers or they're doctors. They have these fantastic, really, their accomplishments go before them. They've done the work. But inside them, they're fixated on race and race relations between blacks and whites, even if they have people that they work with. Because I guarantee you, if you're a lawyer or you're a doctor in America today, you're 90% chance you work with white people. There's very few areas of this country where you can be black and be in the professional sphere and not be working with white people. So are you saying all those people are racist too? Or is it just every other white person that you don't know? Or is it just the fact that white people out there, some people have been foolish, that means every other white person is tainted by that? We can't, can you really honestly accept that as a way to believe in your heart if you don't want people to do the same thing to you? I don't want other people who see me walking around in a store to think that I'm there to shoplift just because I'm black. And so you don't want white people to be seen as racist just because there's a racist one place that you encountered at some point. And yes, I've encountered racism. So it's an interesting thing. It's just, how did I get here? How did I get to be a citizen of this country? And if you trace it all the way back, and for everyone, not everybody knows that. Like, not everybody has had someone in their family. I just happened to, on one side of my family, it was an aunt who did the work. And then on the other side, it was another aunt who did the work. And they're not particularly close. They're in the same family, obviously, extended-wise, but they're not particularly close. And then my husband and his family, an aunt of his, went through and did all the work and found, they have their history laid out too. And it's just interesting to look. You go back through and you see, I look at there's some American Indians in there. There's some white people in there. And you look at all that, and then you realize this is how God brought me here. This is how I got here. And God's provision has provided for me to be here in a place of blessing, and ultimately in a place of, where I should be having gratitude, not for the slavery, but that God has worked it out for my good, that I get to be a citizen of America. And it should be so patently clear to anyone, whether your parents were refugees. I just stumbled upon an account this morning. To be honest with you, I clicked on the Instagram account because the woman was stunningly gorgeous. So it's a black woman. She's an attorney. And as I began to scroll through her Instagram feed, I saw all of these posts about the injustices that blacks in America experience in our justice system. And she's a criminal defense attorney. And as I was reading through her posts, she also had pictures of her mom and her dad from way back in the day. They're black and white pictures, and they're beautiful. And one of them is from Sudan, her mom, and the dad is from some other really tiny country that I've never even heard of, but it's on the continent of Africa. And her hashtag was refugees. Yes, I am an immigrant. And then in each post, she posts something about how hateful Donald Trump is. She has a lot of posts on there about how Donald Trump's extended family are using chain migration to become naturalized citizens of this country, but he's against chain migration. So there's a lot to unpack there. We could do a whole hour about why it's not hypocritical for the president to want to reduce chain migration while his family's taking advantage of it, because we're seeing terrorists come through the country through chain migration. His family members are not terrorists, hence there's a delineation being made there. But that's like I said, that's a whole nother conversation. I was reading her posts and flip it, so Instagram is obviously it's photo driven, but you can type in a bunch of text underneath. And as I was reading it and seeing, I mean, this is a woman who, she has a lot of followers on Instagram and she's gorgeous. And she's taken advantage of everything that there is to offer here in this country, from the educational system to the ability to use social media to grow her business, political activism, whatever she has wanted to do, she's doing it. But I also felt like there's a sense that she's here to take what she can get. She's here to utilize and take advantage of whatever is offered. And it takes hard work to do that. She's an attorney, so obviously she had to go to law school, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also this sense that she's downgrading America, and she really hates America because somehow there's something tainted about it because it was started by whites, and she feels like white people feel it's for whites only or something like that, which I personally could feel, I couldn't feel like that's further from the truth. So I just, the enemy wants to, wherever you have a blessing, wherever something is good and pure and right, and it doesn't matter because we're all human beings, so we don't have any pure stories that we can tell where every single person in this story was upright and never did anything wrong and was sinless and sin-free. There's only been one sinless man, and that was Jesus Christ. The rest of us, we're all full of sin. So even when we're operating at our highest best, we're in we're walking in blessing, we're walking in obedience, we're doing everything right, we're still depraved sinners in need of a savior. Or we're saved by grace and we're walking that out. And so if you look at it that way, how can there be any perfect story? How can there be any perfect anything? There can't. So the enemy wants you to focus on that imperfection and then start assigning blame and seeing all of these horrible, this kind of horrible American and that kind of horrible American, and this injustice is because this person is black, as opposed to this injustice that's happening to people who are incarcerated for minor offenses and they're being charged these outrageous bail amounts while rich people are getting away with raping people and getting $5,000 in bail and 90 days in jail, and then they walk off and continue their life. That's not an issue about race. It's an issue about socioeconomics. It's an issue about injustice in the justice system that has to do with who can pay for the best representation. And so not everything is about race. But if we allow the enemy to steal the blessing, then we won't see it. We'll only see the bad things about where we are. There'll be bad things everywhere you go because humans will be there, and every human is fallen and full of sin. We got to do better than that as Christians. All right, when we get back, we'll take your calls at 866-963-2037, and we'll be talking about Hungary and their Christian center. All right, stay there.
Like, I wanted to have the abortion because I was trying to hide the situation.
When a young mom in crisis walks into a preborn pregnancy center, she's welcomed with open arms and given love, support, and a free ultrasound to meet her unborn baby. This young woman not only chose life for her baby, but heard the message of Jesus Christ and was comforted from the guilt and pain that plagued her. Preborn centers lead the nation in providing free ultrasounds. When an abortion-minded woman sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to choose life for her baby. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and 100% of your sponsorship goes towards saving babies. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson. The political drama in Virginia might just be a preview of a wild, contentious Democratic primary. In fact, Rich Lowry believes we might be seeing the beginning of the first woke primary. To be woke is to be alert and sensitive to any injustice, whether real or perceived. A governor had an image of someone in blackface in his medical school yearbook. That apparently was enough to call for his resignation. Democrats in Virginia faced a growing problem. The publication of an image in blackface in the governor's yearbook was followed by an admission from the attorney general that he had used blackface as well. All the while, accusations were swirling around the lieutenant governor, who was accused of sexual assault. We've been told to believe all women. If so, then he would have to go as well. The controversy in Virginia is merely a preview of a woke primary where any mistake or misjudgment, even in the distant past, can be disqualifying. Any misstep will be viewed through the most hostile lens from a radicalized base of Democratic voters. Rich Lowry concludes the Democrat nomination battle might as well be fought on the campus of Oberlin College and officiated by the Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. White male candidates don't stand a chance. Senator Elizabeth Warren has been criticized for pretending to be a Native American and forced to apologize. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was confronted on television because a number of years ago she used the term illegal alien. She said she was embarrassed and forced to apologize for a term that was in common usage at the time. And even Senator Kamala Harris has been criticized because she was once a prosecutor. This may be the most contentious and controversial primary season we've ever seen in America. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
You know, we think that our country can only be strong if we stick to our identity, if we stick to our heritage when it comes to history, religion, or culture. It is even said in our Constitution that we are proud of all this heritage. We are proud to have a rich Christian culture and a rich history. In Europe, there are certain endeavors which suggest that Europe can only be strong if the member states of the European Union get rid of all of these things, national identity, Christian culture, whatever. And our position is no. European Union can only be strong, and Europe as such can only be strong again, if the member states are themselves strong. And in order to be strong, you need to stick to heritage, and you need to be proud of your roots and your descent, all this kind of stuff. So when it comes to Christianity, for example, we have understood and recognized and acknowledged that Christianity is the most persecuted religion all over the world. It's a fact. You look at figures, it's a fact. And that's why we have created a state secretariat, a separate state secretariat in our administration, which has only one portfolio. And this portfolio is to protect the Christian communities all over the world.
Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó speaking about mass immigration, which is creating in his mind parallel societies within Europe and undermining security. And Hungary has chosen to go the opposite route. They've decided to embrace their Christian roots and to make it plain and evident that they're a Christian country. So if you choose to come to Hungary, which they're also making that very difficult because they feel like the mass migration has been detrimental to their society, then you would be coming knowing and making the choice to live in a Christian society. Now, in and of itself, that sounds like something that would be a deterrent to some people who are, fundamentally practicing Islam, and so it would be against what they would want to do. But if you're practicing Islam as a means of political overthrow, as a way to take over a nation, then you would still say whatever you needed to say to get in, and then over time, incrementally, you take over a society by having your birth rate be 8 times that of the natural population, and by then once you reach a certain mass, getting elected to parliament or Congress, or just like what we're seeing here with Muslims going into Congress and wearing the hijab and presenting themselves in a very anti-American fashion, immediately delineating themselves as being against our key ally in the Middle East. These are the types of things that they would begin to see in Hungary if they allowed this to go on. And what's so unique about their situation is they're a largely homogenous population, which in America we no longer are. And that's due largely to immigration. So it's just interesting to hear him talk about this. He goes on to talk about parallel societies being dangerous. And remember, he's saying it's wrong to push aside Christianity and national identity. And I have 3 clips from him. We have 2 more to go. This next one, he actually goes into what the parallel society looks like. And I want you to listen to this. And in your mind, if you can think of anywhere in America where this is happening, just kind of put a pin in that, make a bookmark of that. And of course, you can always call in 2037, 866-963-2037. Here he is at number 2.
Whenever we understand that there's a Christian community somewhere under pressure, under torture, then we act immediately. We have spent altogether 25 million euros recently to support the Christian communities in the Middle East and in Africa to be able to get stronger and to be able to stay. Bishops representing these churches come to us and ask us not to invite the members of their communities to come to Hungary, because if we do so, then we will contribute to eliminate those communities, which is basically the target of the terrorist organizations. So, instead of encouraging them to leave, let's have them to be able to stay. So that's why we spend on reconstructing the houses which were ruined, so the Christian families can move back. We reconstruct their churches. Now currently 42 in Lebanon, for example. We cover the expenses of 5 hospitals for them. We reconstructed a lot of schools of them, so we rather help them to stay because this was their request.
So instead of fighting each other over whether or not vaccines are efficient, effective, or whether anyone should be allowed to say you should get vaccinated or not, we should be understanding that the real battle here on immigration is a eternal one. Did you hear what he said? He said the bishops in the Christian churches there in the Middle East, they say to him and his leadership and his government, don't invite my Christian congregation to come to Hungary. Because when the Christians come to Hungary and see your good Christian nation and no war and no conflict, they won't come back. And then, so what happens in the Middle Eastern countries? That means there are fewer and fewer Christians. Well, how does the gospel go out if there are no Christians present? So do you see the purpose, the civil war that's going on there, Bashar Assad and Syria, all of that? These are all moves that are meant to upset the ability for Christians to live in these Muslim nations. Then the Muslims are eradicating the Christians. They're not just waging war, civil war style. They're using the war as an excuse to kill Christians and destroy their houses of worship, their neighborhoods, anything that they can do to make sure that the Christians can no longer live there. And so what is the natural response to that? If you were a mom with kids, you're married, and you're a Christian in a Muslim nation, and you find out that you can move to Hungary, why wouldn't you want to move there? So he's saying not only do they want to reduce migration, but they specifically want to rebuild the churches and the neighborhoods and the roads and bridges and homes and hospitals in the Middle East where Christians have previously dwelled, so that Christians will remain in the Middle East, so that there will be the gospel going forward in that land. This is something that's super important for us to understand. If we can take off our battle armor for Facebook for 5 seconds, if we could just put all that down and just think about this is the issue here for our immigration policy for our country and taking in refugees from the Middle East. Why are we taking them in? We're already spending multiple billions of dollars in the Middle East. Why not spend that money, target it and direct it to rebuilding and making safe areas? If we're going to have soldiers there, why not win what we're doing over there so that the Christians can remain? Not because we hate them or we don't want them here, but because we need Christianity in the Middle East. And because we can't take everyone in here. Our country is not suitable for taking in everyone. Whether you're practicing Islam or Christianity, that's not our job. America is not the waiting room for prosperity for every other person on the planet. So I saw that and I just thought, he's making these wonderful points. He says they actually are spending the money that, that they can bring people in and do social programs for them in Hungary, or they can support Christian communities all over the world as a matter of their own personal responsibility. He says Viktor Orban has therefore created this state secretariat that all that secretariat does is work on protecting Christian communities in Syria and Iraq. And they're making it possible for them to stay where they're in their homeland. And that's the other thing. So if you're told, yeah, you can move to Hungary and you're going to need to learn to speak the language there, you're going to have to start over again. but it's safe and that's your only option, then sure, you're gonna jump on that, because at least you can still practice your faith. You can still be a Christian. But if you're told, you know what, the Hungarian people want to help you rebuild your city, your town. They want to help you rebuild your church. They want to help you stay in your homeland, the place where you have your history. It's hard for us to imagine as Americans because we don't have a history of many, many different wars on our lands, especially in the modern era. But can you imagine, you know, being from wherever you live and our listening audience and it being war-torn and some foreign land saying you can come here and learn our language and start over again, and you would basically be saying you're turning your back on America and you're never coming back here. Or you can stay here in America and rebuild. I know for my part, my intention would be to stay here in America and rebuild and stay in the land of my fathers and my father's fathers. It would be to stay here. It would be to remain in my home of origin and to make sure that it was made safe so that my kids, my grandkids, hopefully would be able to continue on in the American tradition. And so if I feel that way, certainly Syrians and Iraqis and others must feel that way as well. So we have to change the way we think about this. And I'm not a pastor. So before I make this next statement, let me just make some caveats for those who've already got their little hands crooked over their laptops and you're going to email me and tell me I'm not a Christian. You can email whatever you want. I can't stop you. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the disclaimer. I'm not a pastor, and what I'm saying, it does not bind you to do what I tell you to do. But it is my opinion that in America, because there's this NGO organization that funnels money from the federal government to Christian churches for helping to resettle refugees, that we are being used by the enemy to strip communities in the Middle East, the best people that they have, some of them, that we're placing them here in America, and they're supposed to be in their home country. They are supposed to be there. These doctors, lawyers, physicians, none of their certifications transfer over to the United States. So they're driving cabs here. They're opening up businesses selling, you know, the type of food that comes from their country. These are professionals who should be back in their home country, rebuilding and leading the resurgence of those nations. And as Christians partnering with the federal government, we have to really look at what is the federal government paying us to do and what is the outcome. I'm not condemning anyone, but you can hear from what he said that it is not being done in the way that it should be done. It's not being done in the way that it should be done. So, okay, I've lost track. We listened to number 2. Have we listened to number 3? If my producer could type in. Because I want to talk a little bit about, okay, so I'm a little off on my show sheet because of the discussion from the first segment, apparently. So I want to listen to Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szarto talking about the people who have moved into his country. And so he's not saying these are Christians. He's talking about, generally speaking, the majority of the migrants who've moved in have exhibited a certain kind of behavior. And it's really important for him as a leader in that country to identify this type of behavior and to prevent others who would practice the same kind of behavior from coming in. It's number 3.
If you look at the western part of Europe, you'll see that parallel societies have been created. So it was kind of a dogmatic issue to speak about social integration of migrants as a huge success story. And if you pointed on facts which deny that, you were stigmatized immediately as anti-European, anti-humanitarian, anti-everything, as a bad person, And during the last years, it turned out that parallel societies represent a huge security risk, a huge security threat. Look at the western part of Europe. In the last 4 years, there were more than 30 major terrorist attacks committed by persons with a migratory background. More than 300 people were killed and around 1,400 injured. That was not the phenomenon before 2015 in Europe. So before this whole migration crisis broke out. So parallel societies constitute a huge security risk, and those who moved in under the framework of this mass migration show total disrespect towards Christian culture, towards the communities living already in those countries. Just to give you an idea, symbols of Christian faith were forced to be removed from public areas just because it was suggested that that might insult the sensitivity of those who are not Christian. I mean, but how you come to do that, you know, to remove to make a decision to remove the cross from the monument of Pope John Paul II in France, you know, for just to give you an idea, you know.
And to be clear, you know, so if to use the example that I gave before of Americans being forced to leave America because of war and occupation or et cetera, if we went to another country and we demanded that anything that wasn't of the same vein as what we left in America be removed so we weren't offended, most countries would say, no, your country has fallen and you're over here by our good graces. Yet European nations don't say that to people who they're begging for a place to stay. When your hand is out and you're begging, you don't have the ability to dictate terms. This is what I have been discussing over and over and over again. I've made this point about Mexico, how they dictate terms to us, but everything they have almost hinges upon American ingenuity and us putting our jobs there and buying things from them and leaving our border open. All we have to do is cut them off. You know how it is. That analogy works also with the, you know, the prodigal son or prodigal uncle or whatever family member. They've always got their hand out begging for you to bail them out. But then the minute you look like you're about to help them, they start making demands. Also, I can't believe are you trying to tell me what to do? Everybody knows loans and money come with strings attached, except people who have their hand out or their hat out who want the loans and the money and the rescuing, right? So how can a people who need rescuing, who are begging for sanctuary, dictate that you can't have your Christian symbols up if they're coming to your house, which Hungary, that's the Hungarians' house. So he makes a really good point there. These people were allowed in and they disrespected the culture that received them and then brought in terrorism with them. Killed and maimed, you know, maimed 1,400 people, killed over 300 with threats of more attacks to come. Created no-go zones and parallel societies, and have really, you know, it's like someone coming in and they say, I just need a place to stay for the night, and, you know, I'm sick and I don't feel well and I'm hungry. You bring them in and you feed them, and then they start rearranging your furniture, throwing out the food that you've cooked, you know, throwing out things that your resources. They kick your dog. They put your, you know, your pet birds out, and they throw your cat out the window, and you're like, what are you doing? They burn all your books, set your furniture on fire. You would probably not be okay with that. Yet that is what we're seeing happening for Middle Eastern migrants going into European countries. And it's happening here in this country. It's okay to say we don't want that. It's not racism or xenophobia. It's just honest common sense. All right, when we get back, we're going to be talking about this ambush by the drug cartel. Stay there.
Here's what you've missed on Airing the Addisons.
The former house church pastor, Brother Fu, is talking about what's going on in China. He's talking about the Chinese government, how it's made its plan clear that they want to change Christianity in China into what they would call Chinese Christianity. Fu said that there would be a retranslation or a summary of the Old Testament with some Buddhist scripture and Confucian teachings and new commentary for the New Testament.
Airing the Addisons. Weekday morning, 6 to 8 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Now, if you're offended by this story, you should be offended by any new presentation of the gospel under any ethnic covering.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the reason we sometimes miss it is because we prefer us. There is no new gospel.
Man.
Dexter's. What's happening in our cities, what's happening in our government, what's happening in our churches, this mess that's going on in the United States of America, the reason for it, the blame can go squarely on God's people. God's not expecting the heathens of the world to do his work here on earth. That job goes to you and to me.
Time to get back to God. Weekday afternoons at 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
The church has to take the lead in ensuring that men are properly trained for fatherhood. We have an epidemic in which boys are not growing up with their fathers. So as Christian men, we have to stand in the gap and make up the hedge so that our communities are not destroyed. When we see fatherhood as a blessing and not an inconvenience, we will see children as spiritual weapons in our arsenal. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Media Minute with Howard Kurtz.
President Trump holding a raucous news conference and announcing his emergency declaration. Took him kind of more than 10 minutes to get to the point, clashing as usual with CNN's Jim Acosta. But when the president was asked about his conservative media supporters, he said, Rush Limbaugh, great guy. He can speak for 3 hours without a phone call. Try doing that sometime. Sean Hannity, a terrific supporter, but he says he's supporting my views, not me personally. And Ann Coulter, who's really turned on the president over the issue of illegal immigration. The president saying, I don't know her. I haven't spoken to her way over a year, but the press loves saying Ann Coulter. President acknowledging she's off the reservation as if to prove the point. Coulter going on KABC radio and saying, look, the only national emergency is that our president is an idiot. This gives a lot of attention to people like Ann Coulter. It shows you the president really is sensitive to what people on the right and the left say about him, and he's not shy about handing out praise or criticism, as he did with Acosta. With your Media Minute, Howie Kurtz, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'll tell you this, the drugs had gotten so bad in my 6.5 years working in Southern Arizona that literally they had to provide every police officer on the department with Narcan, which is something that you use on a person as they're overdosing on heroin or a downer. You give it to them and it brings them back to life. Every police officer had to wear that. Fentanyl had to have that on them at all times. Fentanyl became so bad in Southern Arizona that every single police officer, when we test drugs, we have to be outfitted with a full bodysuit with a mask on, because we didn't know if there could be fentanyl contained in drugs that we test, normal drugs that we normally test. And if it get onto your skin or you inhale it, you can die. It is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. And they don't want to talk about that. It's not only a threat to the community, but it's a threat to law enforcement. What comes with drugs is crime, gangs, guns, murder, torture. All of these things are apparent in Southern Arizona and is moving all across the country.
Oh, man. So that's Brandon Tatum, and he's a former police officer. And as you can hear, he's an expert in this arena. And when I heard this audio, it's crazy pants, isn't it? To hear of a drug that's so potent that you need to wear a suit to go into the room because if it touches your skin, it could kill you. This is what our law enforcement are dealing with. And so the question for me, it always goes back to, do we have to? And I know that might sound like for some people, you're kind of like, yeah, we have to, because everyone understands that crime exists and it's always going to be around. There's always going to be criminals around. And I get that. But I kind of look at it this way too. Look, you know what? Look. If we can stop the fentanyl from coming in, or we can reduce the amount of it that's coming in, why wouldn't we do that? If we could just say, you know what, we have certain police officers and certain police departments, certain immigration and customs enforcement agents, et cetera, who have to do this work, and they have to work in this way. There's no way around it. Okay, so be it. Let's preserve the law and order. Let's prosecute the wrongdoers. Let's, bring in the criminals and let's do that. But if we could find a way to reduce the incidents, why wouldn't we do that too? And that is what the wall is purporting to do. That's what we know it does, because we've seen it do it in other areas where we've built wall. We have hundreds of miles of wall already built, so we know what it does. We have an idea of what this is, right? So then former police officer Brandon Tatum goes on to say he's sick of politicians playing games with our lives. It's number 5.
I'm sick of the politicians playing games with our lives. This is not a game. These are real people having real crises on the border. These are real people in America who need to be protected. The wall is not immoral. They never said it was immoral in the past. There's already a physical barrier there. It's just not effective. And I'll make this point. When you have a house, just say you had a front door on your house and it wouldn't latch. You don't just leave a broken front door on your house that doesn't latch and then hire a security guard to protect it. It will make sense for you to replace the door and make sure that it latches so you can use the security guard to do other things. That's exactly what's going on our border. We need to secure the border so Border Patrol can be utilized in other facets. We can use technology and everything else, but you have nothing without a physical barrier there.
And we've been talking about this. And so you might be thinking, well, why, the reason why I would spend time listening to Officer Brandon Tatum, well, first of all, he's affiliated with Turning Point, and he's been at the Blexit, the thing with Candace Owens, and I hope to meet him at CPAC when I'm broadcasting from there, just to shake his hand, possibly exchange information, so perhaps we can bring him on the program. But it's important to hear from those who have spent their time in the trenches doing this work. It is so important to do that. And, I have a lot of respect. Obviously, my father's in law enforcement. I have a lot of respect for people who do that work. They make the choice to do a job where they're literally putting their life on the line on a daily basis. And not only do they have to put their life on the line, but it also means giving up the security from your family, because your family knows every time you leave in the morning that could be, that could be it, as opposed to other jobs that are much more safe. Now, clearly, only God knows the number of our days, but it is a more dangerous occupation. There's no denying that. But he's speaking to what most Americans have been able to successfully ignore, which is how dangerous the drug cartels have made America. And so we still live in relative safety and prosperity. I'm not denying that. But what I am saying is that parts of our country are becoming more and more dangerous. And to support that assertion, I have this piece about a cartel ambushing Mexican soldiers near the Texas border. An ambush by gunmen from a faction of Los Zetas killed one Mexican soldier and injured 2 others in Nuevo Laredo. 3 attackers working for a convicted terrorist also died in the incident just south of Laredo, Texas. The attack took place along the highway that connects Nuevo Laredo and Monterrey. Moving in various SUVs, a team of gunmen with the Cartel del Noreste faction of Los Zetas attacked a convoy of soldiers patrolling the streets of Nuevo Laredo. The shooters killed 1 Army lieutenant and injured 2 others. Citizen journalists using the Twitter account El Pueblo 2, or La Voz del Pueblo, the People's Voice, warned residents away from the Palmares neighborhood when the ambush began. A video recording shared by the same individuals captured the sounds of the clash as the 2 sides exchanged gunfire. Under the leadership of convicted terrorist Hector Raul El Torre Luna, the CDN has once again advanced their tactic of silencing local news outlets to keep the organization out of public view. None of the local news outlets in Nuevo Laredo reported on the weekend shootout. Now, El Torre, the operational leader for the CDN, is wanted in the U.S. for a grenade attack against the American consulate in Monterrey. The CDN is working to inspire terror throughout the border states of Tamaulipas and Nuevo Leon by dumping ice chests with human remains and written threats to their rivals. Does that sound like what we want happening just over the border of America because these cartels are fighting over the ability to deal drugs? So, I don't often offer kudos or any kind of positive comments about the Mexican government, but clearly the reason they're clashing on the border is because the Mexican military is trying to stop them from dealing drugs into this country in areas where there's no security, where we've not yet secured our border. Do you see what's happening here? Even when we get Mexico, the nation, to act as they should, they're now losing men. They're now losing their people. So it is so important for us to remember that and to support border security, which we've not seen. We've not seen the border security. We've not seen the kind of support from inside of our country that we need to see. So, I know we have, if you're watching the live stream, well, you're probably not getting this right now because we've had a little bit, I think. Oh, no, it's still there. Awesome. Perfect. I just wanted to give an update just in case. So, also, there's, in addition to that, there's the idea that if we let the Mexican drug cartels operate as they have been, on there, and I know we're not letting them, we're fighting them, but if they have the kind of foothold that they have, what's to stop terrorist organizations from bringing drugs into the United States through the southern border? And every time someone on the right makes an assertion about that, every time someone says, hey, this could happen, this could lead to that, an unintended consequence of A could be B, then people will say, that's not true, that's not going to happen, you're just fear-mongering and you just hate blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? We said quite a bit ago, we said that there's a possibility that women and girls could be raped in Target restrooms if they opened up their bathrooms and let any old person go into any old bathroom. You know what happened? Just recently, a 10-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by a man in the female restroom of the Target. So if you can't say to someone, if an employee can't see a man going into the restroom and say, excuse me, sir, you can't be there. If they can't be challenged because all he has to do is turn around and say to you in his deep baritone voice, I'm a woman today, then what can you do? If you can be fired for asking someone to step outside of the ladies' changing area with their phone, then you're not going to say anything. And they're going to go in there and they're going to take those pictures from underneath the little, it's nothing but curtains separating you in there. So it's up to us as parents to say, first of all, I'm not going in there. And I did have some people, I had some people who were like, you're fear-mongering about Target. I still shop there. My Target still has individual bathrooms for males and females. Yeah, they may. Your Target may be one of the anomalies. Maybe your manager has their head screwed on straight and they're like, I'm running my Target the way I want to. Don't come down here corporate because I'm making money. My store's in the black. That might be true. But Target is engaging in this scurrilous behavior and allowing men into women's restrooms, men into women's changing areas, and they already have a bad record as a retail establishment of having people attacked in their stores, out in between the shelves, out in the open areas. They already have this record. I have the catalog of the Target attacks, which I need to update with this newest attack. Sadly, it's on my blog, StaceyOnTheRight.com. People go there all the time and they look at it and they're like, I had no idea. I've had some beautiful, beautiful people, You know how it is when you're at school and you see the other moms and you're like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. Your kids are so cute. And they'll say, I got that, I'm like, where'd you get that so cute? Oh, I got it at Target. I'm like, girl, you still shopping at Target? I haven't been in there in 5 years. Like, why? Why would you not go into Target? Is there something going on? I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't know about them letting the men into the women's changing rooms? I'm like, oh, my kids are small. We don't try on clothes. Oh, well, I don't shop there anymore because of that, because I think it's wrong. And AFA has a boycott and I signed it. And so, yeah, I'm not. So, spread the word. Tell people the reason why you're not shopping there. The petition is located at afr.net and you can sign it. It's still a thing. Like, just because we're not talking about it every day doesn't mean we've changed our minds. And I'm going to tell you, if you're new to the show, you've never heard this. If you're old with the show, like you've been here since Saturday radio and Sunday radio, then you've heard me say before that was my Zen place. I had even started buying groceries there. And I'm a stickler for pricing on groceries. But I had started buying the groceries there because I found myself in Target at minimum every 2 weeks. And I would be buying other things, mainly for the kids. And then I would pick up a few grocery items. And so I was kind of saying, well, I'm buying this at Target now on the list. I'm like, for Target, I would move a couple items over to there. And so the local grocery store the business was going down for them and going up for Target. And I can tell you how much money we've saved since we stopped shopping there, because the impulse buys aren't there. They don't sell clothes at the grocery store. So they don't sell like dishware and stuff like that at the grocery store. So I don't have to worry about getting outside of what it is that I'm supposed to be at the store to buy, because I'm in caps with, pictures of celebrities on them holding white pitchers, which I collect ironstone. And I'm going outside of what I'm supposed to be buying. And that's all personal stuff. Like no one's to blame for that. But Target is to blame for running me out of their store and losing my business, which I felt was pretty significant as a middle-class family, because they just have to be social justice warriors. And the end result is 10-year-old girl sexually assaulted in a Target store. Her family should sue them into the ground. But that won't bring back what was taken from her in that bathroom. And in the end, you know, it's the parents' responsibility to decide. It is the mom and the dad. You decide where you're going to take your kids to shop, where you're going to do stuff with them. And if you decide you're not going to do that, if you're not going to be responsible, then, you know, by all means sue if you want to. But I'm wondering, did they know? Did they know that the men were allowed in the bathrooms at Target? They know there was a battle raging between those who believe that women and children should be protected from predators. Not all men are predators, but you have to have societal systems set up that protect the weak. Yes, I said it. That protect the weak. Women are the weaker vessel. Children are ultimately in need of protection from the adults in their lives. They have to have protection. Those adults protect them from the outside world and people who would do them harm. So, someone on one of the chat streams is saying we have 1.5 million signatures. We can use about another million. He's right. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we don't have like 500,000 of these. So that's the program for today. Thank you so much for being here with us on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. God bless. Be back with you tomorrow. Citizens, enjoy your evening.